Well, yeah. Quite a bit.
I promise, guys, I'm getting kind of good at this video editing stuff, so.
Nice meeting you.
See ya.
All right.
Lights?
Yes, please. Really one open office. And actually, this is probably my second presentation I've ever done. So, don't take criticism out of it. Okay. Samba and LDAP. If you're not, I'll just continue on the title, and this basically comes to it. My name. I'm Michael Cederquist, also your president of OSOG. What is Samba? Samba is, if you're not familiar with what Samba does, it's basically a file and print server for Windows, or for Unix. It's a Linux equivalent of NT4. Samba 3.0 has really done some remarkable things with simulating an Active Directory environment. It is not a full Active Directory environment that you would normally look on like in Windows. It doesn't have access control lists. Even though there's an experimental one in the Gentoo tree if you're using XFS. If you want to run, so you want your server to control certain access control lists, like only you can set your permissions on that folder remotely, and so forth. But you can run your print server through it, so it'll run all your print services, all your file transfer services. Actually does a really great job at it too, and hardly crashes at all. I've ran a Samba server for almost a year and a half here on the campus up in Sacramento, and it runs all the print and all the file transfer and domain controller for the Sacramento campus as an experiment to see how well it ran. And it's been rebooted once. A month after we had it up, we had to reboot it. Not for any problems that we were having with it, but just because we had to move it. So once we moved it, it's been up ever since and hasn't crashed. So I think we have an uptime of almost 400 days or something like that on it. It's pretty good. Also, the other thing is with print is that when the print share on the Samba server looks identical to what you would find on a Windows domain controller or server for that matter. You can run a shared or so forth, and you just click on it. It automatically downloads the print driver from the $print share, which is a hidden share, which is normally found on Windows domain controllers also, to pull all the drivers down. So if you're running like on a 9X box and you click on it and you want to share that printer, it'll pull the 9X drivers. If you're running an NT4 or 2000 workstation, it'll pull the NT drivers down as long as you have them loaded on your server. So as far as that goes, it's really, you really can't tell much of a difference when you click on it. Like I said, the only thing you really have is you don't get a true Active Directory environment where you can't set policies. Like, no, this person can go on the net, no, this person can't. Doesn't have that ability yet. They are working on that, but it's slow coming. Some of the reasons to use Samba over Windows. You've got master file transfer suites. I've copied an 80 meg file of music over to through the LAN to my Samba server on a 2.6 gigahertz machine, and I did it in less than 3 minutes. It was pretty quick. I was pretty happy with it. Longer uptime. Also has cups in it, which is what I was commonly used as the common Unix printing system. If you're not familiar with that, what that does is it has all the popular drivers for most printers out there. So if you want to print from your Unix machine, like I have it installed on this laptop, so I can, if using cups, I can connect to a Windows share on a Windows machine and print through that share, just like a normal Windows machine would. Also, it has the built-in drivers for it, like LaserJet 4 is a popular one. Inkjet, if you have an inkjet printer, has a driver in that for it. It has a list of, and they're called PDD files, so there's a whole list of PDD files. Also, Samba has a compatible with MySQL, so you can actually store your data of your username information or any other miscellaneous information you want to put in those fields to the MySQL database. That's the way things are going in the future, and I think databasing is going to be found everywhere. I don't see it going away. So it's good that it has some MySQL support. LDAP, which is primarily what we're going to go over for central user authentication. With WinBind and so forth, you can use that for central communication. LDAP has some, I'll get into a little later, some abilities that you really can't get away with using, like if you're doing central, like using Samba, WinBind, and so forth for user information, because it can only be used for that. You can use it for transferring user information from your Samba server to your NC4 domain, Windows machine, or vice versa. This is limited at what you can do with the user database. Also, it's a lightweight, stands for lightweight
Directory access protocol.
lightweight directory access protocol. That's right. Thank you. Started to get there. Also, it's free. That's the other reason that's good to use it. Okay, got to do myself. The LDAP, it's been around a while. I mean, a lot of things use it. Novell. Some mail servers will use it for authentication, and because it is used so popular and it's been around since X.5 days or whatever. There's a lot of things that use it. So if you're using LDAP database and you have it, with Samba, you can actually move it to other things. You could also have it, your mail server, use it for authentication. If you have a Samba or a Postfix mail server, you could actually have it connect to the LDAP database and add a user so if you add a new user into your organization for Samba, so they can log on anywhere with that, and it roams with them. They can also get a mail account when you put that information in. So there's a lot of abilities with LDAP because so many things use it. You can just point that to there, your server to that, and it'll automatically pull the user information down for it. And that was primarily what that one does. You can use it for email servers, domain trust, Jabber servers, Samba servers. If you're not familiar with Jabber server that's primarily an IM server, Unix-based. I use it here on the campus for our IM, so we have a local IM system. It's really useful for that. So once I get the LDAP working here, I point my Jabber server, my mail server, my mail relay, everything to the LDAP for authentication. So as soon as I put a user in one location, depending on how I built the script, I can tell it this person gets this person gets that, this person gets this person doesn't get that, and it will put the information in all the servers without me having to go to each server one by one and put the user information in. So it's kind of like it's a back LDAP, or it's kind of like Active Directory in a way, but it isn't. It's a way around it that they did. It's less resource intensive. Doesn't take a lot of power. You can usually power it on a 233 megahertz machine. You can get away with an old box to do all your LDAP authentication, which is really nice. Also, it's very customizable for user information. You can set up your own fields, just like in a database. You could say, well, I don't really care about their full name in that record, or I want to put their full name in, or say I want to put their age in. I want to make sure, if I look them up in the LDAP, I want to make sure that I have all their information. So if it's not in there, I can put a field in that tells it I want to please put user's information, age in here, and then it'll put that in there. So you can set it up for any kind of information you really want to move across. As long as you keep with the standard, I think it's like surname and last name and a couple of the other miscellaneous ones that I can get a list of that you kind of want to stay standard on, because if you ever do connect to a Windows box, you want it to be able to authenticate and work and trust. Requirements that I'm going to go over are basically that you need Samba 3.0, LDAP 2.1, NNS underscore LDAP and also PAM LDAP, which basically redirects those services to go through the LDAP. The PAM is primarily used for the Samba password transfer. So everything that runs through, so it's not just going through the LDAP, it's going through it actually transfers over and goes through the LDAP instead of using its local PAM. And you can run it on either the 2.4 kernel or the 2.6 kernel. The key comp files we're going to go over is slap.conf, which is primarily your open LDAP comp file. That's where everything really sits for your configuration. There's the Samba LDAP init file, which is the LDAP, and the Samba schema, which are both. And I'm kind of got a little confused on the LDAP init tab. The schema is kind of how the Samba, what information it pulls from the LDAP in order for it to authenticate. It has a certain structure, and that's where you would set up your structure for your LDAP. So it pulls only the information it needs, instead of the other information that you may put into it, like your age or whatever. And then the Samba.conf file, if you're not familiar with Samba, that's primarily where everything goes for Samba. If you want it to open up a new home directory share, it's in there. If you want to tell it to authenticate through your LDAP, that's where you would tell it to point to. Samba's kind of nice. There's only really one file, one conf file, and everything's in there. And SMB LDAP tools is also, if you're in Gen 2, you can, when you merge Samba in with LDAP, it'll automatically put that in there. And those are a bunch of Perl scripts which allow you to put in your, like add a user. Like in Samba, normally if you want to add a user, you just put in user add -a, which stands for add, and then the username, and then it'll ask you for the password confirm. And then it does, you can do the same thing, but it's called Samba LDAP add a user. And it just does the same basic function, except it adds it into the LDAP instead of the password. The PS, yeah, it's pass.w file, which is what Samba normally uses. Here's an example of what slap.conf basically has. It tells you what schemas to include. This is where you would tell it, hey, use this schema, and so forth. And these are all pretty standard if you're doing an INS schema. And this is where you would put the Samba.schema, which when you merge Samba and Gen 2, it automatically puts it in the right spot. In Gen 2, if you're using Red Hat, when you install it, you may have to move that file into this directory right here, the Open LDAP, and then point it to the appropriate area to grab it. You can put it under schema, or you can put it. You can just redirect this path to where it's at. But to keep it with standards, that's generally where it's put. The PID file, where everything sits, that's your process ID file that opens. There's two different ways you can do on a database level. You can use which stands for D, I think it's DB, and then or you can do LDBM. That's the format of what it's going to use as the database, and that is the most compatible with Samba, so you can use that one. That's where you put in your suffix. Are you guys familiar with LDAP at all? On how, like Active Directory, and how everything's put in OU and so forth, the directory tree? Okay. Basically, that's where you start putting in your suffix and your VM roots and your management, where your manager fields are. And these are just setting fields where what you're going to name them. So the domain controller is, in my case, would be itcolleges.com, which is what I'm setting up right now. This is the encrypted password that you would put in there. You can put a plain text password in there. It's not real safe. You can generally do that by going into slap password, typing in slap password at the command prompt, and then typing in their password that you want to set. And then it'll after you hit enter, it'll encrypt this password. I'll show you on the next slide. But what it'll do is it'll give you a string of characters in this format, and then you can go ahead and copy and paste it back in there. And it's basically the same thing as in typing the plain passwords, just so when you look at your conf file, you're not showing your password in plain text. Plus, if anybody got into it, they'd have you. So that's good. These are how the once it knows what the variable information is, how do you want it to be organized? And this is how you would set your pattern of how and what priority and how you want it to format. So when the clients connect, it knows how to send the information to them and how to index it. This is what I was talking about. If you went into your file, that you would type in Slack password -s, and then you don't need the quotes. You can just put in whatever your secret, whatever your password is, and then it'll encrypt it, and then you copy and paste that into your Slack. This is the schema LDAP file, and really you don't have to do a whole lot in here. This is already pretty much driven out. You can create this yourself. Like in Genser, it kind of already did it for you, and all you have to do is just kind of change your information to whatever's really what your information is for your particular server. There's not a whole lot you have to actually change in this file, just that you put your information in. Again, you're going to have to put your own password in here. You're going to want to encrypt it, so you can actually, the user can actually connect to the LDAP. This is the Samba.conf file, and this is where all the real magic happens for Samba, so it knows how to connect to it. You know it says work group here. That really is, if you're building a domain controller, that's going to be your domain name. So if you have IT-colleges, that's my domain name for that location. And the NetBIOS name is going to be intranet, because that's going to be our local intranet also. So not to confuse anybody, I just put that in. Password backend tells it that it's going, because the LDAP server is also on the same machine that this machine's, the Samba sitting on. I told it to point to the local host, so it doesn't go out. User map tells you where the user's information is stored, what kind of print control I'm using, cups, add user, delete users. These right here are primarily the scripts that are ran. When you join a domain controller for the first time, it's going to say, all right, I need to make a machine account, because Samba will take the NetBIOS name of the client machine, and will want to, it needs to create an account for that. And what it does is, so when you go look through your user base in your Samba or your Unix machine, because it makes a Unix account name, it's going to be the name of that machine that connected. So you're going to have your users and you're going to have your machine accounts. It's usually their NetBIOS name of the client. So that'll pop in there. But in order for them to connect, they need to have a machine account already on the Unix machine, or they can't connect. So what this does is it runs the script, which is, remember I was telling you about the SMB LDAP -user add curl script, stands for M, which tells you it's going to be a machine name, and then this will be user, and then this is where it would add the group of the user that's actually in, and those are variables. So anything with a U would be user, and anything with a G would be group. Let's see here, I'm going to find the machine group so I can show you how that goes in there. Oh yeah, add machine script. So that puts that in there, and that adds that NetBIOS name of the machine that's going in there. So it'll add that machine's NetBIOS name into the Unix machine, and once it connects into the machine and has access, then it's going to want to say, okay, you're joining, when you go to log in, and you add a user to the domain, it's going to want to add a user also to that. So it's going to want to put that into the domain controller, or the LDAP also. So it puts in the password file, which is normal what Samba uses, and also puts in the LDAP server. You can have it do it both. You can put it in the password file and the LDAP. That way, for any reason the LDAP went down, or your network connectivity went down between domain controllers, the people in Sacramento would still be able to log in. if they have a local account. That's important because networks do go down and people have to continue to work even if they can't communicate with the master LDAP. So that's what these scripts run. So anytime you add a machine or anything from remotely, because if you didn't have those scripts, what you'd have to do is go to the actual domain controller itself, add in an account for that NetBIOS name manually, and then you wouldn't be able to join the domain like from the client like you normally could on a Windows machine. So it helps, so then you can simulate it. Actually, you don't have to do too much differently on the client side. These are also little login scripts and this is all the global listing. So I didn't put the whole thing in there because it's a long file. But this is primarily what you need to put in to put a domain controller up. Login drive, where you want it to be, where the information is going to go. Then you're going to go to your local and then your username in your home directory. Yes, domain logins, user level, preferred master, yes. And this is also where the login profiles, the home directory profiles users would go. So if you made a profile directory, so are you guys familiar with roaming profiles? Okay, roaming profiles, if you're not familiar with what it is, if you log into one client machine and then you saved your information on your desktop or your My Documents for any reason, and then you logged off and then you went on to another machine and logged in, your desktop, all your files in My Documents and on your desktop would follow you along with all your settings. So next time you logged in on somebody else's machine, you would see your background and your document up there. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing sometimes, because sometimes people put like 5 gigs of data on their desktop and they're like, I don't understand why it takes me 2 hours to log off and log in every day. I don't understand. So there are some disadvantages to roaming profiles and there's some advantages also. But that's where it would be stored if you wanted to do roaming profiles. Also, if you wanted to like have it, you could put in a login script. I believe I didn't put it in there, but you can also make logon scripts also in like a batch file. So when people log in, and you can do it per user now with Samba 3.0, which means if you wanted a login script for Joe Schmo to sync time and grab this, or you wanted Julie or whatever said, no, I don't care about that, I just want to sync my time, you could have separate ones. You could also make a default one. If it doesn't apply to anyone, it rotates to a default if they're not listed. This is also at Samba.com. I had to make a separate slide because it was kind of running out of space. But here's where you would you'd put in all your LDAP information in Samba. It's relatively small when you look at it, but what user IDs to start, what ranges it can be in, when bind, and so forth. It's a duplicated stuff. But this is the primary stuff you want to do. You're doing your information for your controller, where you want the OU to be stored. Now you can define that in your LDAP also. It doesn't have to be named people. It can be named users. And that's, OU is primarily where all your user information is going to be stored.
What is the ID map? UID and the GID?
Those are group. Everything when you add a username in or any kind of user into the machine, it's associated with a name, a user ID. I don't know if you've noticed that. Like anytime you put a user in, you'll say like 500, 501, 502. Yeah. So if for any reason you deleted the home directory and you look at the permissions, or you deleted that user and you go back to that permission of that user, and there's no name associated with it, it'll say like permissions 501, 501 group. And you're basically just telling it where the range is to start from because it uses a different ID number than what the Unix one uses. So you don't want those to overlap, so you generally want to set those in a group defined area. And also here's the LDAP password sync where you can sync. So anytime any users are added into Samba, it'll automatically sync those to the LDAP using the provided information that we put in, like the passwords and add a user and so forth that they use. When you go into this smbldap.conf file, system identifiers, which is, if you know Windows machines, they have those, everything has a system identifier to it, the security identifier. You would do that by running the net get local SID in your command line as root, and it'll pop up with a number authenticating with the LDAP server, and it'll assign it. That'll be your number, and then you put that into your smd.ldap tools, because that's basically all it is a script. So everything in it is it needs to have that security identifier in order to say, hey, this is a trusted source, and so forth. What was that? Did you wait? Okay. I thought you said something. And that's pretty much it. I mean, that's as far as I've really gotten on the as far as the basics of getting LDAP running with Samba. There's more to it, obviously, if you want to customize it, but to get it just up and running, that's primarily what you need to get done. I've got it running, and the service is running on it. I just haven't got the SMD LDAP tools working because the Perl scripts, and I found this out later, the actual Perl scripts that are written for it were for the older version of LDAP. So they haven't modified those Perl scripts yet, so you have to do everything manually and still add everything differently now. So, but these are primarily some good links that you can go to. This one's primarily for the older Samba if you're using a 2.4 kernel or the Samba 2.4 software. But 3, these two are for the Samba 3s, and this one's actually specifically for getting it running on Gen 2, which is pretty cool.
Is this slideshow going to be available on the? I know the maybe the video will be after it's edited, but will the slideshow be available?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we can put that on the right, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to find out the best setting for the video, because I like when I looked at it and encoded it and stuff. Be kind and rewind.
So, yeah.
Windows Network, you know, but I don't even have Windows loaded on my laptop anymore.
Yeah.
Full copy of Windows. There it runs. Quite nice.
I've got to get on different programs and applications that are Windows only, especially in a network environment. So this allows me to have my stable operating system and use Windows and Windows applications if necessary. And if it crashes, it shuts down my VMware. I just restart VMware.
Also, you can take control of USB devices, you know, like if you had a USB hard drive or something like that.